So when I talk about Paul McCartney albums that bring a feeling, like how Ram was so experimental but also so homemade feeling and was very indie, and how McCartney 2 just takes the gears off, this one is definitely one of Paul's most sad albums. Of course, the song that brings those feelings is Here Today, which is the best song from here and probably my second favorite Paul McCartney solo career song. It's a song about him and John's relationship, his and John, and the song really got some tears out of me the first time I heard it because it really has this effect of just talking about how they were so close through the years, but with John's death in 80, it really hurt Paul. And but some other songs like Tug of War and his collaboration with Ebony and Ivory, and there's others that he made. He made one more, but all these songs are really good. But this just gives this album of a tug of war. The idea is a tug of war. Paul, and half these songs are like the traditional love Paul songs, but the other songs are these sadder kind of, and it's Paul's tug of war between two sides. The opening, that's why the opening song begins with heaving, like people having to pull and stuff. And unfortunately, this is the last really good Paul McCartney album of the '80s, as they turn into that kind of synthesis. They don't go so well until like 1995, their return to form, or in the '90s. So Tug of War, I first heard here today, in April. But when listening to this is one I'm glad I didn't forget about to cover. Even though this is deep into the kind of 82, I still thought I needed to cover this because I just love this song, this whole album. It's so sad, and I don't think Paul will ever make another sad album like this because Paul really did something that I didn't know could get under my skin so much. This album makes me kind of cry thinking about it. Like Here Today has this message of a guy who was his best friend. He lost his best friend, and is wondering if he was here today. And it's finally explaining he was glad he knew him in his life. This is such a great song after you hear the argument between Dear Boy. Not really, but too many people, How Do You Sleep, that argument between both of them. And those two songs, this is a good resolution. And I'm glad that Paul never really escalated the fight earlier because it hurt Paul, but he didn't want to, escalate it, especially after John's death. He's glad he didn't do that. And I'm glad, and that never got really that bad because these two were ultimately brothers in the end. There was no, sure they bickered with each other, but there was no hatred between the both of them. And that's why I'm happy the Get Back documentary is going to show more of that relationship. But as the album, Tug of War is his best of the '80s. Let's just agree on that. And if I was to rank on the scale so far of the albums we've covered so far, I'm still gonna say this is definitely, out of the albums we covered so far, New is definitely the weakest. McCartney 1 is followed. It goes New, McCartney 1. Then I'd have to say McCartney 3. McCartney. Then we'd have to go. I'm gonna have to go with this Tug of War and McCartney 2, and then Ram. That's how it's going. That's how my rankings are going so far. But in his collaboration with Ebony and Ivory, really good, and that song is one of the best from this album. But as a total, I'd say Tug of War deserves a 10 out of 10. I won't say this for many of Paul's albums, especially in the '80s, but I think this guy really. I feel like this album made such a great impact of such a sad time for him and losing his best friend almost, because this still was really sad for him, even though it had been a year past. Plus, I will give this album some. It's got like my favorite. It's definitely a war between. This is my favorite Paul McCartney album cover. But yeah, have a good day, everyone. Stay healthy. Cherish the ones you love. Peace and love, everyone.